Sometimes the tale behind a work of art is every bit as captivating as the art itself. At times, its origin is woven into its very essence. Such is the story of Fernando Pessoa, a 20th-century writer, and his magnum opus, the Book of Disquiet, a narrative so extraordinary that it feels like a piece of fiction in its own right. Pessoa was born in 1888 in Lisbon, Portugal. At the tender age of 5, he was thrust into the harsh realities of loss and impermanence when his father succumbed to tuberculosis. The following year, his younger brother also passed away. Soon after, his mother remarried, and the family relocated to South Africa, stripping Fernando of the familiar landscapes of his childhood. During his time in South Africa, Pessoa mastered English and cultivated a deep admiration for English literature. At 17, he returned alone to Lisbon, where he would remain for the rest of his life, devoting himself almost entirely to writing. Yet by the time of his death in 1935 at the age of 47, Pessoa had published only a handful of books that garnered little attention, and he spent his life writing in near-total obscurity, unrecognized by the world. And yet, he seemed to die with the quiet conviction that he was, or would one day become, a literary giant. In a hauntingly prophetic twist, he was right. After his death, Pessoa's work, the manuscript for the Book of Disquiet, along with tens of thousands of other manuscript pages that are still to this day being edited, remained tucked away in a wooden trunk, unknown by anyone. It wasn't until 1982, 47 years after Pessoa died, eerily the exact same age of Pessoa when he died, that the Book of Disquiet was found and published. This book would go on to become what is widely regarded as one of the most unique and important literary works of the 20th century. Inside the book is a lifetime's worth of Pessoa's reflections and musings about reality and dreaming, about tedium and selfhood, about the absurdity of being and the futility of doing, about the simultaneous complexity and simplicity of life, about the contradiction and paradox at the core of everything. The book is made up of a collection of fragmented vignettes written in a style somewhere between diary entries and poetry. There is no real linear order to the book, and it can arguably be experienced just as well backward as forward. Even more interesting, Pessoa does not claim to be the author of any of it. Rather, it is credited to a man named Bernardo Soares, an assistant bookkeeper from Lisbon, Portugal, as well as possibly a man named Vicente Guedes. Guedes and Soares, however, aren't real. They are characters Pessoa created to create the book. Found throughout the massive collection of all of Pessoa's manuscript pages are various pseudonyms, fictitious authors that he credits different pages and collections to. These authors aren't just different pen names, though. They are different characters with different writing styles, personalities, views, and backstories. Pessoa referred to these author characters as heteronyms, and there are around 80 that he wrote under throughout his lifetime. Thus, the Book of Disquiet is not exactly a non-fiction book from an anonymous author, but nor is it really a novel about a fictional character or story. It is somewhere in between. Because of this, it is often described as the weirdest autobiography ever written. Pessoa himself described it as a factless autobiography, or an autobiography of someone who never existed. The book's unique structure and style is, in many ways, an essential supporting leg of the book's themes. The use of heteronyms seems to reinforce a key philosophical theme throughout the work: the fragmented and illusory nature of the self. With incredible accuracy and poignancy that feels cathartic to read, throughout the book, Pessoa frequently describes the inherent alienation, disorientation, and loneliness associated with being a person. He wrote, "I don't know how to feel or think or love. I'm a character in a novel as yet unwritten, hovering in the air and undone before I've even existed, amongst the dreams of someone who never quite managed to breathe life into me. I'm always thinking, always feeling, but my thoughts lack all reason, my emotions all feeling. I'm falling through a trap door, through infinite space, in a directionless, empty fall. My soul is a black maelstrom, a great madness spinning about a vacuum, the swirling of a vast ocean around a hole in the void, and in the waters, more like whirlwinds than waters, float images of all I ever saw or heard in the world. Houses, faces, books, boxes, snatches of music, and fragments of voices, all caught up in a sinister, bottomless whirlpool." And I myself, am the center that exists only because the geometry of the abyss demands it. I am the nothing around which all this spins. I exist so that it can spin. I am a center that exists only because every circle has one. In these haunting words, Pessoa captures the essence of his existential turmoil, a profound sense of disconnection and fragmentation. He paints himself as a phantom, a half-formed character suspended in the liminal space between existence and oblivion. His thoughts and emotions, though constant, are devoid of coherence or substance, leaving him in a perpetual state of freefall through an infinite, directionless void. His soul, he describes, is a chaotic vortex, a swirling abyss where fragments of his experiences, faces, voices, memories, are tossed about in a ceaseless, meaningless dance. And at the center of it all, he exists not as a solid, defined self, but as a hollow point, a necessary axis around which the chaos spins. He is, in his own words, the nothing that gives shape to the whirlpool, a center that exists only because every circle must have one. This passage is a raw and vivid expression of Pessoa's struggle with identity, meaning, and the very nature of existence. A struggle that resonates deeply with anyone who has ever felt untethered in the vast and different expanse of life. For Pessoa, self-understanding, or perhaps the relentless attempt to grasp the elusive nature of the self, is akin to a free fall down a bottomless rabbit hole, a descent that ends not in clarity, but in annihilation. The very act of trying to comprehend and articulate one's inner world while tumbling through this existential void only deepens the sense of disquiet and disorientation that defines a lifetime. Throughout the Book of Disquiet, Pessoa repeatedly circles back to themes of tedium, futility, and the haunting specter of meaninglessness. To him, life itself is a grand delusion, a series of fleeting dreams strung together without purpose or permanence. "I've never done anything but dream," he confessed. "This, and this alone, has been the meaning of my life. My only real concern has been my inner life." For Pessoa, the pursuit of external achievements or tangible goals is ultimately pointless. Reality, as we perceive it, is no more substantial or meaningful than the fragmented dreams that dissolve upon waking, slipping through our fingers like smoke, never to be fully remembered or understood. Life, in his view, is a transient dream, destined to be obscured by the fog of consciousness and forgotten as soon as the morning sun rises. As Pessoa himself wrote, "If I write what I feel is to reduce the fever of feeling. What I confess is unimportant, because everything is unimportant." In this way, his writing becomes both a release and a resignation, a way to temper the intensity of his emotions while simultaneously acknowledging the futility of it all. The recognition of the futility of doing anything and the advocation of receding into a dream world reinforces another major theme of the book: contradiction and paradox. After all, why write about the pointlessness of doing anything and the impossibility of ever adequately saying anything while doing something and saying things? Perhaps, however, this does not speak to the incoherence of Pessoa, but rather speaks to what Pessoa might believe is useful in paradox. In medicine, certain preventative and preparation treatments contain forms of the bacteria or virus that causes the disease the treatment is used to prevent. Likewise, arguably, both creating and consuming good literature and good art expose you to the virus of being, so you can hopefully develop enough immunity to survive. Perhaps paradoxically then, the driving force that compelled Pessoa to create and write and do was the awareness that creating and writing and doing is pointless. It is also relevant to note that the Book of Disquiet was left unfinished. With this, it is almost as if the book mirrors Pessoa's philosophical conception of existence. Trapped inside a trunk, only truly known after Pessoa's death, once it could no longer be changed by him, interpreted only through a fragmented collection of vignettes written by someone who never existed, finished by time, not by intention. The book itself seems to be an almost perfect metaphor for a person. It is unsettling to consider all of this, and then realize that the word Pessoa, his birth name, translates in English into person. If that's not enough, perhaps the most confounding aspect of the Book of Disquiet's story is that it contains passages that prophesize its fate. In it, Pessoa wrote, "It sometimes occurs to me, with sad delight, that if one day in a future I won't be part of, the sentences I write are read and admired, then at last I'll have my own kin, people who understand me, my true family in which to be born and loved. But far from being born into it, I'll have already died long ago. I'll be understood only in effigy, when affection can no longer compensate for the indifference that was the dead man's lot in life. Perhaps one day they'll understand that I fulfilled, like no one else, my instinctive duty to interpret a portion of our century. And when they've understood that, they'll write that in my time I was misunderstood, that the people around me were unfortunately indifferent and insensitive to my work, and that it was a pity this happened to me. And whoever writes this will fail to understand my literary counterpart in that future time, just as my contemporaries don't understand me. Because men learn only what would be of use to their great-grandparents. The right way to live is something we can teach only the dead." And of course, all of this came true. It's happening right now, in this very moment, as these words are read and reflected upon. We are, in a sense, living out the prophecy Pessoa laid out for himself a century ago. One can't help but wonder, was this the meticulously orchestrated plan of a genius creative mind, a man who saw beyond the confines of his time? Was it mere chance, a serendipitous alignment of fate and circumstance? Or was it something else entirely, something beyond our understanding, a convergence of artistry and destiny that defies explanation? Whatever the answer may be, the story of the Book of Disquiet has become inseparable from its artistic essence, as if the tale of its creation and discovery were always meant to be part of its fabric. The book carries an almost mystical, spiritual quality, as though it were a sacred text for those who don't believe in the sacred. It reads like a manual for nihilists, a guide for those who find themselves adrift in a world devoid of inherent meaning. It is a work that can, and likely will, devastate those who encounter it, forcing them to confront the fragility of their own existence in the futility of their pursuits. Yet paradoxically, it also offers a strange kind of comfort, a reminder not to take oneself or life too seriously. After all, sometimes the cure lies in confronting the ailment head-on. Sometimes exposure to the very thing that unsettles us is the only way to find solace. In this way, the Book of Disquiet is not just a literary masterpiece, it is a mirror, a challenge, and ultimately, a form of healing.